What makes the Galaxy Note special? Sure, it was the original phablet device back in 2011, but why buy one today for the starting price of $1,000 when so many other great big phones exist? In the new Galaxy Note 9 we have the long-awaited answer. In part, it's the big new S Pen, a wireless evolution of the trademark feature of the Note, but more than that, it's the Note's triumphant return as the power user phone, a big powerful handset with appropriately beefy specs above and beyond a normal flagship phone. Because this is not a normal flagship. Unlike the last few Notes, this is Samsung's super flagship. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss our future videos, and we'll jump right in. So externally, the new Note might look identical to last year's Note 8, but don't let that mislead you. Almost all the things that make the Note 9 special live on the inside. That's why talking about the Note 9's exterior feels like retreading so much old ground. This is the 6th Samsung flagship to use design language. We're well accustomed to it, and as they say, familiarity breeds contempt. You know the story by now. Curved glass and metal all over, and a super tall 18.5:9 aspect ratio. The metal finish is more of a traditional matte than the glossy coating of last year's model, and the chamfers make a welcome return too, making it feel just a little bit sharper. Although it's slightly larger in all directions than the Note 8, the hand feel is pretty much the same. This is a big, tall phone, of course. This is a Note after all, and it's a bit heavier too on account of the larger battery. It also needs to be so big to accommodate the largest display in a Samsung flagship, a 6.4-inch Super AMOLED Infinity display that knocks the socks off any other pocket-sized screen. In what's become a semi-regular tradition, the screen in a new Samsung flagship once again has the highest rating by specialist outlet DisplayMate. And sure, you absolutely expect this quality in a screen of a phone this expensive, but that doesn't make it any less impressive to behold. Excellent colours, unparalleled daylight visibility, and minimal distortion in the curved edge screen area. The other colours we're talking about are the ones around the display. Samsung unfortunately isn't bringing back the opulent gold option from last year's Note, but instead it spices up a familiar design with some fresh hues. Western Note fans get to choose between ocean blue with its contrasting yellow S Pen, or lavender, which isn't exactly pink, but it's close. It's more of a rose silver to Apple's rose gold. The colour is one of a couple things that'll help you tell a Note 9 from a Note 8. The other is the updated backplate design. The big Cylon-like camera visor from before is gone, and mercifully the fingerprint scanner now lives in a more sensible place further down the back of the phone. It's still a bit of a stretch to reach, especially for the first couple days, but it's an improvement all the same. Your other biometric options are Iris Unlock, which is a little bit slow and finicky, or regular Face Unlock, which I found to be quick and reliable pretty much all the time. Other Samsung staples haven't gone away either. Still no to the notch, and yes to the headphone jack. And speaking of audio, the Note 9 gets an upgraded stereo system, using the earpiece and bottom-firing loudspeaker. It's one of the many upgrades it inherits from the S9, and while the LG G7's boombox speaker is louder, Samsung puts in a respectable showing here. The Note is still water resistant too, with an IP68 rating that'll protect you from unexpected dunks and downpours. The rest of the spec sheet shows just about everything you'd expect or could possibly want in a high-powered smartphone in 2018, except perhaps the new Android 9 Pie. Same Snapdragon 845 or Exynos 9810 combo as the Galaxy S9 running the show, the $999 base model gives you 6GB of RAM and 128GB of storage, or go whole hog with 8 plus 512, that's the top end model that'll set you back $1,250 US. For what it's worth, I've been reviewing the base model with 6 plus 128, and performance has been great, with just one exception that I'll get to later. So what about the thing that defines the Note? The S Pen has a bunch of new tricks this year, and unlike previous versions of the stylus, most of the new functionality is rooted in hardware, not software. The S Pen is powered and Bluetooth connected now. It manages this by packing a tiny supercapacitor battery into a pen that's only slightly larger than the Note 8's, to keep it powered for around half an hour when it's away from the phone. At first this sounds like a huge compromise, but that's not quite the case. The S Pen charges while it's docked in the phone in as little as 40 seconds, and even if the power runs out, you can still use it to point and draw. The battery only powers the wireless functions. When it's away from the phone, the S Pen turns into a programmable Bluetooth button, and this menu lets you control how it works in various apps. The big one you've probably seen demoed already is taking a photo in the camera app with a single click, or double clicking to switch cameras. You can also long press it to launch the camera or any other app of your choice, and map a single or double tap to hop between photos in the gallery, or pause or skip ahead in music and podcast apps. This stuff is cool, and the technology behind it is really impressive. I've used every Note since 2011, and the S Pen in general has never been this essential revolutionary thing for me. It's cool, occasionally very useful and convenient. I appreciate having it, but I don't necessarily miss it all that much when I pick up another phone. For me, the button is going to almost exclusively be a camera shutter button for the foreseeable future. But hey, we'll have to wait and see what developers do with it once Samsung opens up the SDK. In any case, all this new hotness augments everything else the S Pen could already do, like screen off memos and live translation of text in any app, which is actually super useful if you're traveling. I'm focusing a lot on the S Pen here because really there's basically nothing else new in the software department compared to the Note 8 or S9 Plus. We're now up to Android 8.1 Oreo, which is nice and brings picture-in-picture compatibility for more apps. Otherwise, Samsung Experience 9.5 is a very subtle upgrade and a very familiar experience for veteran Samsung fans. Even right down to unfortunate holdovers like Telltale stuttering when opening Bixby Home. Seriously, how is this still a thing? Alright, Bixby. I should point out that I'm using a non-final version of Samsung's upgraded voice assistant, Bixby 2.0, but yeah, as you might have guessed, even 18 months after Bixby's debut on the S8, it still doesn't do a whole lot to justify that dedicated hardware key. Which is frustrating because now you can no longer disable the Bixby key like you could before. And if you tap it even lightly when the screen is off, then Bixby will be the first thing you see when you unlock. I can't tell you how many times I've taken the Note 9 out of my pocket to see this screen instead of what I was expecting. There is some neat stuff you can do in Bixby though. You can type to it now or unlock it by saying "Hi Bixby." Bixby now supports more apps and it can understand more complex inquiries too, and you can group tasks together as quick commands to save time. But the commands it does recognise are still so scattershot, and there's a lot of frustrating guesswork involved in using Bixby Voice and figuring out exactly what it can and can't do. All of this is compounded by the fact that Bixby's speech recognition is limited to 3 languages, and even then it isn't great. Compared to something like Google Assistant, there's a huge gap in functionality and ease of use. Bottom line, Bixby's a lot better, but it's still nowhere near good enough. And seriously, just let me turn off that button. Let's talk cameras. The camera hardware of the Note 9 is pretty much a carbon copy of the Galaxy S9 Plus. That's mostly fine, but of course Samsung isn't entirely unchallenged in the camera department anymore. It isn't the undisputed champion, but it is still one of the best. Like the S9 Plus, you get dual optically stabilized 12-megapixel cameras around the back, the second being used for telephoto zoom. Once again, the main camera can switch between f1.5 aperture for low light and f2.4 for sharper captures in daylight. On the video side, you get crystal clear 4K capture at 60 frames per second and the best super slow-mo feature I've seen at 960 frames per second. Take a look at our Galaxy S9 Plus review for a more detailed rundown on what this camera setup can do. So while the Note 9 doesn't introduce any new camera hardware, it does boast new software tricks. The big one is AI Scene Enhancement, which is a lot like what LG and Huawei are doing with AI in their cameras. Samsung's is far less obnoxious though, it's on by default, and though you can turn it off in the settings, I've left it on for as long as I've been using this phone. Unlike Huawei's AI features, Samsung's aren't jarringly different. The enhancements are all quite subtle, but almost always welcome. Samsung's night mode scene enhancement in particular has really impressed me. Otherwise, often the only way to tell it's doing any kind of scene enhancement is to look for this little icon at the bottom of the frame. Then you've got something called Flaw Detection, which is supposed to help you identify problems with shots you've just taken, for example if the subject is blurry, or if someone blinked, or if the background is blown out. This is a small thing, but it's actually super useful and has saved me a lot of time and disappointment. Overall image quality from both cameras is of course excellent. Samsung's cameras aren't quite as spectacular in low light as Huawei's P20 Pro, but they are more consistent in the way they shoot in other conditions. Most of the time their photos are just as impressive thanks in part to the AI, as well as some other image processing improvements. Samsung's camera is also a lot quicker and more reliable than the HTC U12 Plus, which shows that DxOMark scores aren't necessarily everything. On the other end of the scale though, Samsung's live focus portrait mode remains one of the weaker parts of the camera, being slower and less reliable than other high-end portrait modes including Google's Pixel 2. That complaint is hardly unique to Samsung, but it's worth mentioning all the same. Now for arguably the biggest upgrade, the Galaxy Note 9 boasts what so many of us have been waiting for in a Note, a truly ginormous battery. On paper, it's a sizable upgrade from the S9 Plus and Note 8, with a 4000 mAh cell alongside all the Samsung staples like wireless charging and adaptive fast charging. The extra 21% in capacity compared to last year's Note 8 goes a long way, taking the Note from a phone with okay battery life to one that lasts a very comfortable full day. I tend to push my phones hard, especially when I'm using a Note with all these whiz-bang features that I want to use constantly. In fact, the best test of the Note's longevity was actually making this video, where I was constantly on the go and using Panasonic's camera remote app that's notorious for murdering phone batteries. The Note 9 held up better than anything I've used recently. On lighter days, I get around 6 hours of screen on time across a day, starting mid-morning and plopping it back down on the wireless charger around midnight. That's an easy full day, but this isn't quite a multi-day phone yet. Samsung, to be fair, doesn't make that claim, but still, if you're expecting it to match the otherworldly battery life of some of Huawei's Pro series phones, well, Samsung isn't quite there yet. Whether any phone is really worth $1,000 or more is open to interpretation, but it's clear that the Galaxy Note 9, even with such a monstrous starting price, is the purest embodiment of what the Note series is all about. Not just a big screen, not just an S Pen, but the power and endurance and features to back that up, paired with Samsung's best cameras yet. Unlike the last few years of Notes, the Note 9 is a no-compromise experience. There's no need to worry about a smaller battery or weird fingerprint placement. This year's Note isn't just bigger and different compared to the Galaxy S. For the first time in a long time, it's superior in every way. It's a little cliche to say, but this is the first Note I've used in years that doesn't feel like just another flagship. Then again, this isn't just another flagship, this is Samsung's super flagship. And if you can stomach the price tag, I don't think you'll be disappointed. That's it for now. Be sure to subscribe here on YouTube for coverage of the next wave of Android phones coming later this year. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.